Hey, everyone. Welcome to another Brap Rant. It is Friday, March 1st. Looking forward to March Madness, but we're not going to talk about college basketball. We're going to talk about why we deserve better from gaming influencers and media. So with the words of LA Knight, let me talk to you. Hello again, everyone. Thank you for joining this Brap Rant. This is kind of, I want to say this is quite at the 11th hour, but something that I planned this afternoon, or planned this morning, I should say. And just wanted to, first of all, congratulate Square Enix on the release of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which officially came out at midnight. And I've been playing... only about an hour and a half or so, but I tell you, it just, at least for me, has the feeling of a very special game. I don't know if any of you have had the experience of playing a game and you're about an hour into it, you're like, hey, this just is something about this game feels special. And I know that's maybe for some that's a bit unrealistic, given it's only an hour and a half or so into the game, but I don't know. I've had those experiences before. Where I pick up the controller and an hour and a half, 2 hours into a game, I'm just like, this feels special. And that's what this game feels like for me. The music is just, top notch. The gameplay mechanics, the story, the characters. I'm looking forward to playing more of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth today. And looks like Twisted Sin says I only got 3 hours into it. Then I had to go to work today. What's up, Craig the Tech Guy? So yeah, unfortunately, work will get in the way, responsibilities of gaming, but such is life. But Jumpy Game says, I'm 3 hours in and loving it. Sephiroth is an amazing villain. Yes, Sephiroth is one of the more popular villains in the Final Fantasy series, franchise. But I will say he's probably not the most evil of villains. I think that would go to Kefka from Final Fantasy VI. Who committed just mass genocide. But Jumpy Gaming, I can't wait to get back into the game later on. Now, Game Logic will be joining me here in just a few minutes, just a few minutes here. He's actually in the process of wrapping some things up. He'll be joining us for this Brap Rant. But again, as I mentioned at the start of the show, this is kind of like almost like a part two of my rant last week. If you remember when I said, as it relates to content creators, influencers, we deserve better. You deserve better. The conversation around gaming is just really, you've heard us use the word enshittification. You've heard Game Logic explain what enshittification means in terms of the gaming industry and technology. But I'd argue that that's happening right now with content creation. I said this on last week's show that the democratization of voices on YouTube, while it certainly has given people the opportunity to have their voices heard and give an opportunity for people to actually earn a living. And there's been some talented content creators out there. There's also been a negative impact to that, where everyone has a voice now, and I think there's kind of been a race to the bottom with the dialogue around gaming and the amount and the kind of information that we're getting with video games. So Logic just got him to Adam here. There he is. Logic, can you hear me okay? Do a quick sound check.
Yeah, man. Yep, I got you.
All right, Logic. Thank you. Thank you for joining, sir. Appreciate it. Was just kind of ranting and raving about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which released at midnight. I've only got about an hour and a half into it, but I can't wait to play more this weekend. It's what I'm going to be focused on. But I was just doing a quick intro and in terms of what we're going to be discussing here in this Brap rant, and kind of like a part two of what I discussed last week. Logic, I think I mentioned to you, I got on my soapbox and I said, hey, look, we deserve better. You deserve better. The listeners, when I say you, the listeners, in terms of just the information, the conversation around gaming, it's, while I certainly think that YouTube has done some really great things. It's given people voices. It's given people the opportunity to create content where they can, and some instances, make a living off of just doing YouTube videos. One particular individual, Mr. Beast, comes to mind. My kids talk a lot about Mr. Beast and watch his content quite a bit, but that's someone that comes to mind. But there's a downside to that, Logic, that you and I've talked about quite a bit behind the scenes, where there's a lot of just bad conversation, bad faith arguments, a lot of bad news reporting information around gaming. And like I said to you this morning, I think we get a lot of that in just, I think, general news media. And it's just unfortunate that we have that in video games, and the discussion around the enjoyment of video games, I think, has kind of been sucked out for these takes of, which we'll talk about here in just a minute, hearing people say, oh, third-party exclusives being on one game, on one platform, and not on the other is criminal. I mean, that kind of stuff I just think is just ridiculous. But I want to grab the super chat here real quick from Donnell Brown, who is, I think, Donnell, are you the Raiders fan? I think you are. You are the Raiders fan. Yeah, you are the Raiders fan. Yeah, Donald Brown with there you go, with the $2 super chat. Raiders gang in the house. Okay. What's up? What's up, Yobi? Great seeing you. By the way, do me a favor. Hit that like button if you haven't done so already. Helps out the channel. And also, if you're new, subscribe, hit the bell notifications so you're alerted when we go live. So, Logic, just the bad takes, man. I think that's probably a great place to start. Just the bad takes that I see a lot on YouTube. It's really bad. Part of what I would like to see, and I think you would agree with me, is when people are discussing like this conversation around PlayStation 5 going day and date on PC. A lot of the content creators and even people like on this week's show, this past Wednesday, a lot of people just are seemingly just rattling off talking points from their favorite influencer or content creator on YouTube. It's like they're not even formulating their own opinions or thoughts themselves. They're listening to individuals and just regurgitating what those individuals have said without adding any nuance to the conversation. Would you agree with that, Logic?
So I think the thing that I like that you said this morning is what we're really seeing an enshittification of citizen journalism. We're seeing choke point journalism waged by the big media outlets, right? What they have seen over the last decade is they have seen the rise of influencers. Those influencers have encroached upon their business. They are now partnering with them, utilizing their same tactics, and then also being dismissive, disingenuous, suppressing, tamping down the voice of those of us who are operating independently in the name of monetization, creating large followerships, clickbait journalism, in order to recapture, right, their hegemony over the space. And because the big media outlets are kind of the equivalents of the Microsofts and the Googles and the Apples in the space, they're the ones who have access to the large user base. They're offering those influencers gateways and access to that followership, and also gateways and access to, executives like the GLT, right, who have a dialogue with the media to influence the media and wage their PR campaigns. And so what we're seeing is we're just seeing the joining together of large influencers with large followerships with media, with large-scale mainstream media, compromising their ethics and morals and values in order to obtain the business results that they want, and then dismissing everyone else under the guise of you're console warring or you're jealous of my success.
Yeah, and there's a few habitual offenders that do this, and really this started. What really started bothering me is when we go back to the rumors of Xbox bringing games to other platforms, and people were upset, and I understand why somebody would be upset. You spend $500 on a plastic box on a gaming console, and historically, people have always many people have bought boxes or gaming consoles for exclusives because there's that ROI for them in buying exclusives, like you've talked about quite a bit, Logic. And I can certainly understand why somebody would be upset about that. And what I found disingenuous is influencers saying to people, well, you shouldn't be upset. It's just a rumor. And saying to those individuals, like, why don't you just wait? Now, I don't disagree with speaking out against people who are reacting in a very toxic way, like cursing out Phil Spencer, acting unhinged and tweeting at Phil Spencer. I can't believe you did this. I was a loyal customer. That kind of stuff. Like, I don't agree with that. I think it's a little bit of. I think it's a bit extreme. But what's really disingenuous, though, is when the content creators are telling people that you shouldn't feel this way. It's just a rumor. Ha ha ha! We were right. Like pounding their chest. We were right.
Well, let's even go back, right? Well, in the midst of the rumors, right? As I showed one of the perpetual offenders their receipts from that time period, right? They said, first of all of them used that issue as the main topic for their podcast for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. That is the topic that they covered in a 1-hour podcast for like 40 to 45 minutes of the podcast. So again, that is them being opportunists. That is them monetizing off of it. That is them taking that and seizing on that tabloid journalism to become its own route. And in fact, remember that the whole thing started with an article by Tom Warren, who is part of that group, and I know is one of their friends that they have a relationship and a communications line with. It's not like this was reported by Insider Gaming, right? Or some bottom of the tank website or fan site. This was a topic started by a large mainstream media outlet that has a ton of readers, that a lot of people, and despite the fact that I disagree vastly with everything Tom Warren writes, because he's a corporate bootlicker, but I will say does work for a website.
You really don't like Tom Warren.
I will say is a website that one part of it that I do admire is they and Engadget have a governance system and a rubric for when they will run with a story and when they won't. And you will see them pause and hold and pump the brakes before they run wildly with something that isn't corroborated. So I will give them that. So the story started from a formal place. It started from a source that is part of that alliance. And then off of that, they platformed off of that and capitalized on it and talked about it on their podcast. And that individual wrote several tweets where they said, people have a right to be mad, and here's why. They also wrote tweets that said, the gaming leadership team needs to address this. Their community, right, is outraged at the lack of information and is granted making assumptions, but there's a reason why, and there's a reason why they're bothered. That individual also wrote tweets that said, when you guys speak, this is what you need to address. You need to allay fears about this. You need to allay fears about that. You need to address exclusivity. You need to respond to people's topic of ROI. They were part of the volume that said this was a problem. And then the moment Xbox opened their mouth, they immediately turned tail, rolled over, exposed their belly, and said, see, you guys shouldn't have made a big deal out of it. All you guys were worried over nothing. It went from consumer advocacy to consumer shaming in a split second. And that, I am just going to say, is absolutely disgusting.
I agree. Absolutely. And that's part of the problem. And it's almost like they're serving as PR mouthpieces to Microsoft as a corporation. You know, and it's just like, hold on a second, Hamp. I want to bring up something here real quick. I'm trying to set this up here in StreamYard. Give me just a second. I want to share something here. Let's see here. There we go. All right. All right, give me a second here. You know what, Logic? I need to get dual monitors, man. I think it's time. All right. So here's something that I found disingenuous today. Paris, who is an influencer, I believe he's on Gamertag Radio. He's also on the Xcast on Kind of Funny, which is the Xbox centric podcast. And by the way, I just want to say that I don't think all gaming journalism, gaming journalists are bad. There's some good ones out there. There's some ones that I enjoy reading. I think you've heard me praise GameIndustry.biz on numerous occasions. I think they are a great website to get information used from as relates to the gaming industry. I've had Ryan McCaffrey on. I know you and I have some differences of opinions with Ryan.
I'm throwing him in the pile with the rest of them. He was one of the ones that started 4K30 is concern trolling. He's at least currently he's in that group of people who are trying to be dismissive and talk people down and press them down and oppress them and keep them from not having any voice. Yeah.
Well, that's the other thing that's wild too, is the suppression of information, suppression of voices, you know, by gaming media, by influencers that are tied to gaming media. That is just, and I think I would say, you know, more platform centric influencers as well. I mean, you know, there's individuals who have blocked me for questioning them when they bring up, you know, certain topics. And I'm like, well, no, that's not how that works. They just block you. They don't want to have a discourse or dialogue. You know, for them, it's more important to monetize and to mislead people. This is what I said last week. It's more important for them to mislead people, to lie to people, and to monetize off that, to play on people's emotions. And that's why I said, we deserve better. You deserve better. It was my my soapbox.
It's very much like religion, right?
Oh,
in religions, gods can't be questioned. Priests can't be questioned. They have to be seen as perfect all the time. And in fact, even when the priest or the god admits to being imperfect, then the crowd will eat them, as happened to Destin the one time that he tried to speak out against Xbox. Right? His entire followership, a large part of his followership, that he had Pied Pipered down to the riverbed, right? Marched the lemmings to the cliff, right? The moment he spoke in opposition, it was like a scene out of the Isle of Dr. Moreau, right? then the half men got back down on all fours, right? And proceeded to eat their jailer.
Yeah. Like I think if you're going to have access to industry in the media, and like, to me, like, you have a responsibility to be thorough, to have more nuanced conversations, not to have the kind of conversations that I expect from like platform centric, like YouTubers. And I think you said this last week, Logic, or recently, where you said, like, even gaming journalism, like it's blurring the line between tabloid reporting now, tabloid news. That
it's not blurring. It's firmly there. The people who hold the largest sway within the media are the people who are Maury Povich's, Jerry Springer's, right, and Geraldo Rivera's. And we're seeing it here. We're seeing it on your screen, We're seeing it on IGN, and it's not like you said. It's not a categorical dismissal of everyone at IGN. Quite frankly, in fact, I feel like Dan Stapleton, who got slagged last year for his Starfield review. Actually, I appreciate a lot of what Dan's done, and I've followed Dan in his writing since he was at PC Gamer, and he is now the head of reviews at IGN. And he actually has a rubric. He actually has rules. He actually has things that the reviewers aren't allowed to lean on and use. Like they're not, you can't bring to him a 7.0 review without thorough justification. You can't use terms in reviews like there's something here for everyone. Like he actually has a philosophical rubric that they have to comply with while they're writing reviews. That's not to say his system's perfect, right? There was the Nintendo guy who plagiarized, right? But my point is that he has a regimen, he has due diligence, he has discipline, he has a process, right? And so tear him down and accuse him, whatever you want when you disagree. But the point is that he's not just flying by the seat of his pants. He's not just doing clickbait. He's not just allowing things to just go willy-nilly right in whatever direction. He's providing people some foundational guardrails to stay in between, and that's not the way the rest of the staff behaves, I think.
Yeah, and actually, I should have pulled up this screen first before pulling up that other screen that I just had up. I want to play this real quick. Hopefully everyone can hear this. So this is a conversation around Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Paris is playing the game. He's discussing this on XCast with, I forget this gentleman's name on the left. That's
Snowbike Mike.
Snowbike Mike, thank you. So he's talking about his experience. Paris is praising Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. But here's what's interesting. The follow-up here is interesting. And he says this.
People are so excited for it. But then that brings up the problem. You can only play it on PlayStation 5.
Yep.
And the Xbox community was pretty vocal about that this week, that how bummed out they were that this great game, if they don't have a PlayStation or a PC, by the way, you can't play this game. I mean, you don't have an Xbox or a PC is what I'm saying, but you can't play this game. Yeah, and it sucks. Just flat out, it sucks. And to your point, Remake isn't even on Xbox right now. And my thing just comes to this. It is coming from a third-party publisher. We obviously see everything that's going on in the industry right now. I hope this is the last time we see something like this, in the sense that we got to have these games, especially the third-party ones that I'm talking about specifically. We got to have them on every platform that you possibly can. It's almost criminal that a game this good, that is just getting universal 10 out of 10 praises across the board, right, can only be played on one platform right now. And you have a section of the gaming audience that's on the outside looking in, and they're hoping that maybe in May or June, it'll come to PC and eventually come to Xbox. We got to stop doing that. We just simply do. When I see people talking about that online, I'm nodding my head. I go, yes, I agree. It 100% should be on Xbox right now.
All right, Logic. Couple things here. When he says that we see people talking about this online, look, and this isn't a console war, by the way. I know people are like, oh, you're just console warring, Brap. No, this isn't console warring. The group of people that I see talking about this online, and the people that are speaking the way Paris is here are essentially rattling off what Microsoft has been saying about exclusivity in the industry. And I forget what their what is it, more when more gamers play, more gamers. I forget they're saying.
When everybody plays, we all win.
Yes, thank you. And so it's a subset of that community, or not subset of that. It's that community that is actually the ones that are saying this. And he's basically rattling off, and I've heard his previous commentary on exclusives. And I'm just like, you sound very much like you're regurgitating the things that Microsoft has just said about, more games everywhere. And it just seems a bit disingenuous to me, Logic.
Do you have his receipts of the things that he's tweeted out before about exclusives, where he was previously he praised exclusives and said that they were essential to the industry?
Yeah.
Essential to Xbox?
Yeah, I think he's giving himself a little wiggle room by saying, first party, but even with something like, here's the thing, and this is how I look at it. He's talking about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth as a third party exclusive. Well, I mean, Bethesda ZeniMax was a third-party publisher. Microsoft took that off the table. Okay.
Right.
So the end game is still the same. The end result is still the same, except that actually, and I would say it's even greater from the impact's even greater from the with Microsoft owning this publisher, because those games may never. Well, now we don't know. Now they come
because it's permanent, right?
Yeah,
at least Square Enix. Again, Xbox has the right, and the industry and the market allow for Xbox to approach Square Enix and offer them the money in the same way that Sony did, to say there is something you have that we want on our platform.
Yeah.
So yeah, the statement you're talking about is when everybody plays, we all win is the tagline, which I've written a tweet about that bothers me, because now when I go back and I pulled the history on that was actually their tagline to support the notion that they're the good guys in their attempt to champion accessibility, which I totally agree with, and is a totally is something that within my own morals and value system, right, I think is important. I think it is important to get people who have physical challenges, who have bodies and capabilities that don't conform to the mainstream and the norm. I think it is important to invest in getting them technologies that allow them to play games that they can't play. And that's a platform agnostic statement. Being an older gamer, I am someone who recognizes that while at certain ages you aren't impacted by those challenges, many of us will become impacted by those challenges as they get older. Anybody who's watched Sons of Anarchy, right, and knows the character Ron Perlman played, who struggled with an ability to ride his motorcycle because his hands cramped up, right? I suffer from that, right? I don't like, I quite honestly, I spend money on a wheel and pedals as a big racing game fan because I can play racing games then longer. When I'm playing a racing game on a controller, which is one of my favorite genres, I can only play it for so long because my hands cramp up.
Yeah.
But my problem now is that statement, that tagline, which I think had a moral and ethically positive vector, is now being referred to by Phil Spencer and the Xbox gaming leadership team as a business strategy. And it is not being used to talk about accessibility. It is being used in this narrative that says that every game should be everywhere and there should be no more platform exclusives.
Yeah. Well, I think they're doing that logic to drain the value out of exclusivity, because that actually favors them to do that.
Right.
But and I don't have those receipts, logic, but he's been pro exclusive before, and I wouldn't have used the word criminal. I think it's a little bit hyperbolic, but also he's also skating by the fact that there's actually benefits, and to your point, logic, like the fact that he doesn't realize that, hey, and that Microsoft has opportunities to engage in these conversations with Sony. I mean, not with Sony, with Square Enix, to bring these games to the platform. There was an article at the start of this generation by Imran Khan, where he was speaking to developers, different studios, and they were telling them that PlayStation was being very aggressive in locking up exclusivity, third-party exclusivity, and they were outbidding Microsoft. They're outbidding Xbox. And when I read that, I was surprised. I was actually shocked to hear that, because given everyone likes to point to Microsoft's war chest, but I was actually surprised to actually hear that. And Sony was very aggressive in outbidding Microsoft for exclusivity. So Microsoft has had opportunities to bid on, based on the reporting from Imran Khan. We don't know what games those were, but has had opportunities to lock down exclusivity, but chose not to pay more than what Sony was willing to pay for that content. So. And not just equal opportunities, but when you put it into context, actually greater opportunities, because they have a larger financial backing than the PlayStation Corporation does. As we talk many, many times on the show, the PlayStation Corporation is valuated at something like 115, 120 billion-ish. That is in comparison to, they're like 1/6 the size of Microsoft, in comparison to the $3 trillion company, right? But Microsoft chooses not to leverage its resources that way. What they choose to do is they choose to spend $70 billion, $10 billion, $8 billion, whatever, to go out and acquire studios, to take them off the board permanently,
to make it so that it is impossible for them to be negotiated with to do exclusive deals. Here's one of Paris's receipts here. So back in September of 2020, what he tweeted is, if future games like The Elder Scrolls 6, Starfield, and Fallout 5 are not exclusive to Xbox platforms, then what was the point of this acquisition? The point is to add value to Game Pass and incentivize to purchase Xbox hardware. It is why you have exclusive content. The reason for the flip-flop now is that Game Pass hasn't moved the needle. It's been static since January of 2022. It has done nothing but churn for 2 years. It is because it has not incentivized people to purchase Xbox hardware. 27 million Xbox Series X and S's have been purchased, being outsold at an almost 2-to-1 scale by PlayStation games. Does Paris think that's just happened? That, I don't know, what, God rolled a dice and divine intervention caused people to buy? No. It's because consumers are incentivized to buy a product that offers them a value proposition, and they have determined that value prop on PlayStation outweighs the value prop on Xbox, despite Xbox giving you a lower cost of access to games. And again, that's not an indictment against Phil Spencer, Sarah Bond, Matt Booty. That is just a simple statement of where the market competitive stance is right now.
Yeah. One of the other things you said about exclusivity, I don't care if a game is exclusive. I only care that it's available for me to play it. Also said PlayStation will have exclusive games. Xbox will have exclusive games. Nintendo will have exclusive games. It's part of the business. They give you incentives to invest in their ecosystem. A game being exclusive is not a requirement for you to enjoy it. So, I mean, here, and this is January of 2021, where Paris says this. PlayStation will have, I'm going to say this again. PlayStation will have exclusives. Xbox will have exclusives. And by the way, exclusives, I mean, I've been gaming 40 something years. It's always first, second, third party exclusivity has been a thing. And, Capona, this is actually a great question here. Why is what Paris says so valuable here? Just curious. And that's kind of what we're getting into. I don't think he offers much value to the conversation. And I'll show you why here in just a second in his response to somebody who brought up the actual benefits of a third-party publisher partnering with a platform owner for exclusivity. Because what happens, Logic, when Sony partners, in this instance with Square Enix? PlayStation helps with the funding of development, the marketing, things like that. There's benefits to the publisher, to the developer for entering in that kind of agreement. And we talk about having the ability to develop for one piece of hardware, the optimization that goes into that, the level of quality that goes into it because you're only developing for one hardware platform as opposed to multiple platforms. I mean, that's why we typically see exclusive games tend to perform better than third-party games. And so this is where I'm saying that there needs to be more nuance as opposed to these philosophical utopian type discussions that I'm seeing around games everywhere. It's great. Everyone wins. It's like, no, because there's an impact potential to quality. And now we're seeing too, Logic. And I saw your tweet earlier. Now is all of this conversation. People are saying, hey, you know what? Just get used to the idea of lower quality. What? Like why is like this is what's maddening to me. Only in gaming do consumers argue against their own best interest. It's mind-boggling to me. I don't understand what's happening. It makes no sense.
Yeah, and this like that behavior literally culminates my last 27 months of a large part of the things that I've been warning about. These are the types of things that are stated by the part of the market that is a clear and present danger to others of us who enjoy the art form. Because those people are okay with the commoditization of games. Those people are okay with the race to the bottom. Those people are okay with getting sub-optimized products that are not as good as the optimized ones. And if you want that, that's fine. But what I have a problem with is when you assert via voice that is the only way forward, that is the only thing that is acceptable. You try to, quite frankly, speak for me and tell me that exclusives aren't good for me. Like, how, I mean, just quite frankly, how dare you? Like, I don't need you to tell me that I can't drink Johnny Walker Blue, right? That I can't buy a high-end car, that I can't buy a house in excess of 500K. I don't need you telling me that what's good for me is the same thing that you want.
Mm-hmm.
What are we doing? Like, the purpose the purpose of government, right, which exceeds the functionality of most of average everyday citizens, right, is to provide protections when your freedoms would be infringed upon. I don't expect government to legislate for me what it is that I want in terms of how I lead my life. So I damn sure don't need a compatriot, another person in a market, trying to yell and shout and scream and dictate what the market should be providing for everyone. We all make that choice. And you know what? We make that choice by the demand signal that we send to the market and by how we spend our money. And guess what? Look at the NPD top 10. Look at the NPD top 20. Look at the UK top of the charts, top 40 every month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the signal that the market is sending.
Yeah. That's why all these guys saying AAA games are going away. Like, no, the market demand's still there for the reasons you just mentioned. And those games tend to be games of higher quality. Some of the live chat says quality subjective, though. I don't necessarily agree with that. The quality subjective. We have ways to measure quality in terms of performance. You could go to Digital Foundry, pull up their videos on games that where they measure performance. I think we could see visual fidelity in comparison to games that don't have the same level of fidelity. So I don't necessarily agree that quality is subjective. I think there's ways.
I think we should array that across a spectrum, right? I think there's a spectrum that is, and there's a spectrum that not. And let's talk about the science, right? In the discipline of software engineering, in software test engineering, which is where I've spent a large part of my time, that is actually part of the science, right? What we talk about is the difference in the delta in doing software test engineering and the methodologies that we use for a business intelligence application, for an analytical application versus an entirely entertainment-driven application. Because one of the problems is that I can't establish deterministically the success criteria for an entirely entertainment-vectored software application solely by the quantification rules and the methodologies that I use, right, for other applications. I can't nail it down entirely by white box or black box testing. I can't do it by data regression entirely. There is a part of the entertainment field that is entirely driven by people's personal tastes and the things that they like or dislike. And we can kind of maneuver around to like some elements of that, right? And that's why people get paid some money to go off and do market research and to do, test groups and to gather data, and they do these surveys because they say, hey, what really resonates with the market right now is story and narrative. And, then there's some concern about replayability, right? And then we do these things where we come up with these hypotheses and we bounce them against actual telemetry, right? We see people yelling and screaming about replayability and 40-hour, 80-hour games. And then we see telemetry that says, and I'm saying this as a for instance, I'm not saying this is the way it is. Then we see telemetry that says, okay, but 90% of people don't complete 40 and 80-hour games. And we see telemetry that says, and this is true because this has been reported and corroborated and presented at GDC. We see people who don't engage in replayability, right? So the guy, so Joseph Fares, right, who presented at GDC back in early teens, maybe. I think he did a joint presentation. Was saying, hey, why is there this hyper focus from a design perspective on replayability when we have the telemetry that says that people don't participate in it? So I think there is an aspect of the notion of quality, and where I'll agree with you is I don't necessarily agree that people utilize the label of quality appropriately all the time. And again, that's part of the problem of doing test engineering in this space. But I do think there is an aspect of it of what people perceive as quality that is not entirely quantifiable.
That's a great point. Logic. I do want to go to this other screenshot here of what Nib's response to what Paris was saying. And I don't always agree with Nib, but I will say this. I do appreciate him, and he's got these long responses. I do appreciate the time that he puts into articulating his perspective, doing research. Like, this is the kind of conversation we should be having. And I'm going to share with Niv. He said, predictably, now Xbox is starting to creep away from exclusivity. The anti-exclusive campaign is gearing up. And I don't disagree with him here. I think, look, if we pulled up Paris's previous tweets, and it's not just him, by the way, it's other people in the community. I've seen this, other influencers where I've seen this, where as soon as the event happened last week or 2 weeks ago with Xbox, their voice tracks changed along with Microsoft. It's very eerily similar. It's almost like they're doing free PR work for a corporation. And as a consumer, you should be weary of those influencers and those individuals who are parroting and have pivoted and have not parroting exactly what this corporation is saying. And I don't disagree with Nib seeing here about the anti-exclusivity campaign that I'm seeing, that I'm hearing other content creators discuss or talk about. One of the things that he talks about is how, exclusives benefit consumers. He talks about exclusives increase competition. He talks about exclusives benefit publishers and things of that nature. And he provides some links here for some of the points that he's making. He's talking about the first and the third and first party contradiction. And I'll read this part. He says, I already see goalposts moving to exclusivity on being bad with third-party titles, but somehow it wasn't bad when Xbox acquired 30-plus third-party studios, publishers, partly to make multi-platform games exclusive. That's a big double standard. I don't disagree with him. We talked about ZeniMax Bethesda, where the Elder Scroll games, the Fallout games, sold very well on the PlayStation platform. They were a third-party publisher. Those games are gone. Now, maybe there's a conversation to be had that those games might be coming back. We don't know that. That's part of the conversation now with Microsoft. Moving some of their releasing some of their first party games on rival platforms now, but he brings up that point. He also says both involve taking on or mitigating financial risk. One simply only viable to ultra cash rich tech giants, and other exclusivity deals is something all platforms can have and continue to do. Industry standard. I don't disagree with that point. That's what I said. The last 40 years I've been gaming, this has been industry standard, and I don't necessarily think that it's caused harm for consumers. I will say this, Logic. I said this to you earlier. I think something needs to be said. If you are an Xbox consumer and you had an Xbox One last generation, you should know by now that there are going to be some games that are not going to be released on Xbox and will only be released on PlayStation. And I'm not talking about first party exclusives. I'm talking about third party, second party exclusivity on the PlayStation. We see that. That's been since the Xbox One generation, and it improved during the Xbox 360 generation. Actually, I would argue probably the opposite happened on the 360 generation. But the original Xbox, that happened, the Xbox One, that happened, and now this generation that's happened. So if you know this as an Xbox consumer, and you're making that choice to buy that console, despite that history. If you made that, if you made that purchase, to me, you're okay with the content that Xbox gets. Yeah, go ahead, Logic.
Just the same as you should have understood if you went out and bought a 3D TV. Just the same.
I did one of those.
Just the same as you should understand that if you go and buy a German car, you are likely going to have higher maintenance bills than somebody who buys a Chevy or a Ford. That's not an entirely holistic statement. It may have to do with reliability, but I'm just saying as a for instance. But the point is that, and this is our problem. I think somebody in the chat, maybe Mash, was making a joke about, corporations aren't your friend. Are influencers your friend? Are YouTubers your friend? I think, for me, the perspective I come at it with, and the reason why I started doing this, 22 years ago or so, was because I felt that there needed to be a voice that is always oriented around consumer advocacy. And that's not, and I don't mean consumer advocacy from the means of arguing and screaming on behalf of consumers, because quite frankly, I think a lot of that is sensationalist and clown based in terms of just not being realistic. A lot of influencers yell and scream and shout in an effort to tell people to bury their heads in the sand and not acknowledge realities, like the one Brap just talked about. Like, if you go out and you buy an Xbox today, you need to understand that there are 27 million of those units. That is the current install base, and that therefore you are agreeing to join 10% of the console install base in the market right now. And that's going to mean that there are going to be certain dynamics and certain things that happen right around that. Maybe some upside is going to happen just because of Microsoft leveraging, right? Again, I go back to its vast financial resources, but in general, you are agreeing to join a very niche part of the market. And there are probably going to be impact and product choices and things that happen in the life cycle of that product that are around it being a very small part of market share. That shouldn't prevent you from doing it. Again, I have been a huge tablet PC fan when they were a very small part of the market. I was a huge Zune fan when it was an incredibly small part of the market. I was a big UMPC person and Windows Phone person when they were incredibly small parts of the market. Somebody on Twitter just asked me, like, did I write for any outlets? And I'm like, yeah, I wrote for outlets that reviewed those devices, right? When they were incredibly small parts of the market that just had a really fiercely loyal, very small percentage niche support community. I get it, right? But at no point did I think, oh my God, UMPCs are going to take over the world, right?
Yeah.
Not while they were $1,500 a pop, right? And I kept hoping for them to get down in price, but I didn't bury my head in the sand and go, oh my God, these are the greatest things ever. More people should use them. Suck it up and go spend your money. No, like, the point of when I talk about consumer advocacy, what I talk about is put information out, make people aware of it, disposition it somewhere where they can access it, point them to, hey, you may want to go look at opposing opinions, right? Make sure you emphasize that you are not universally correct and can never be questioned, and then encourage people to go off and research additional information and arrive at their own conclusions. The people who are the influencers and the YouTubers and the journalists who are not your friend are people who, when you say, hey, I don't want to play a game that's 4K 30, respond to you 4K 30 is concern trolling. Those are the people who are out waging gaming politics and, professing propaganda and not really looking out for the interests of all consumers. Because they shouldn't just be looking out for consumers who are aligned with their own perspective. They should be looking out for all gaming consumers.
Yeah, I don't disagree, Logic. And a lot of these content creators, the only thing they're looking out for is their engagement and their wallet. they are literally monetizing. And I said this earlier, they're monetizing by lying to people and not doing the things that you said they should be doing. It was interesting. So you said the 4K 30. There was something else that I remember. It escapes my mind, but I'm sure it'll pop up at some point. I'll remember. But there was another example of that, something similar to, that's just concern trolling, or, one should be concerned about that. But I do want to go back to what Nib's reply here. Again, I mean, Nib put some time into this response. I appreciate it. I think, again, that's the kind of conversation we should be having, where somebody's doing their research, they're critically thinking about their response and providing examples. And he actually does. He's like, also interesting. Same arguments didn't spring up for Xbox's time exclusive deals: Stalker 2, 4K Dark Tide, Medium Tunic, Death Store, Ascent, Falconeer, Score, and High on Life. I mean, they didn't from Paris. I didn't see that. But Paris does reply, yep, that goes for all games like Stalker 2 replaced on Xbox 2. First party exclusive, yes. Third party, why not be everywhere? And their response, for the reasons I've outlined and more, benefits the consumer, benefits the platform, benefits the publisher. And Paris' response is, it's just my opinion, take it or leave it. I'll leave the console war stuff for others to debate. This is the problem I have. Assuming that Nib is console war. Nib is not console warring here. Nib is, and he says, no, I'm not console warring. This is me trying to have a mature conversation about the benefits of exclusivity or such deals, while as providing proper context, quotes, insight, and figures. You don't have to agree, but it'd be nice to get a contextual rebuttal. And this is a response by somebody who's a content creator, who's part of a large
media outlet,
and and kind of funny, who has access to the industry, who people go to for opinions on the industry. And this is his response. I'll leave the console war stuff for others to debate. This is why I say we deserve better. This is so dismissive.
So disingenuous, so reductive. And the big thing is, it again, I mean, this is a really great example, right? Because the point is, I don't agree with everything Nib writes, right? In fact, well, a lot of times I feel like Nib is bringing focus to a thing that I feel like doesn't need to be focused on. Look, I don't give a shit about the difference between Gran Turismo 7 and Forza Horizon, right? I play both games. Both of them are fun. Both of them do things well that the other doesn't do as well, and vice versa, right? So like that type of stuff. Like, but what I will say is what Nib tries to do is he tries to put some rigor and some discipline behind what he says, and he tries to provide substantial, tangible, evidentiary, right, reasons as to why he thinks the way that he does. And what's disingenuous is this dismissive comment by Paris, right, to not do the same thing, right? Or at least maybe admit, hey, I'm super busy, I can't really respond right now. I will take your tweet and I'll use it as an email into KGFD, and we'll read it on the Xcast, right, and I'll respond to it there, right? But this whole thing, and a lot of this is what I've been talking about recently, about this whole thing of people jumping to the conclusion that Sony is going day and date. I'm like, there's some of us who are having a conversation around gaming who try and put foundational underpinnings behind why we think the way that we do. And what I will admit gets super frustrating and super tiresome is for people to run by, do drive-by shootings, a machine gun, and not provide the same, but to say things like, "Oh, you're flailing." You know, I'm like, look, I don't expect you. And I'm like Nib. I write these things up that are extremely lengthy, and I get it. Everybody doesn't have that time. But what's unacceptable, what's not quid pro quo, is for you to come by and tweet some soundbite from an executive and assert that, well, because the executive said it, they're right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, there's a lot of us who are engaged in trying to decompose these things and pull them apart, and go off and do research and find additional data to put these things through the smell test and say, well, does that really make sense? Like, or is that just something somebody said for PR? Let's not forget, I think, as I brought up on DPS, let's say shout out to Forte who's in the chat. I said on DPS last night, I said, let us not forget that CEOs do things like a Nintendo executive saying there's no new hardware coming, and then literally 30 days later put out a brand new console. Like, all of us should be collectively engaged in applying reason, rationale, critical thinking, having a discussion. And yea, verily, maybe not all agreeing, but not doing things like Paris and saying, "Oh, well, you're just console warring."
Yeah, that was really disingenuous on his part, and that's part of the problem. Where I say we deserve better. Like he should have responded in kind to Nib, like presenting some kind of like detailed, like as Nib mentions, like it'd be great to have a contextual rebuttal. I'm not so sure that Paris can actually formulate contextual rebuttal at this point. Like that is so disingenuous right there. You know, and it basically it's like, oh, you're just console warring, and like, no, that's not console warring. Like Nib is bringing up reasons why it's beneficial for consumers, it's beneficial for publishers. He's providing context. He didn't come out here saying, "Oh, you know what, you're wrong and your opinion is trash," because that's a lot of the responses we see. But this is the engagement we get from somebody who has access to the industry and somebody who is part of a larger media site. I'm saying he's not providing any value here.
I mean, the
any nuance, any critical analysis, any critical thought. It's like, my God, like you were in the trenches with gaming journalists. You were shaking hands with developers, publishers. Like you were in a position to have great discussions because of the insight, I would imagine. And I don't know. Now I'm wondering, I'm questioning the insight here But I would imagine just having that access, you'd be able to have good conversations.
Well, and this is my thing. I mean, his response is, it's just my opinion. And I appreciate that. But I think what I would want, right, as an audience member, as a customer, right, is I can go out onto Twitter and farm 1,000 opinions on any given day of the week. It would seem that as a customer, what I would really want is I would want some domain expertise. This person has access, as you mentioned, right, to people they can interview, people they can ask. Why is this position not supported by, hey, I've gone out and talked to a lot of developers, right, who are part of AAA studios, and they've all said they would rather develop their games for multiple platforms. I have yet to hear that type of substantiation and corroboration.
Mm-hmm.
I have yet to hear, hey, I talked to the head of 343 Studios, to the creative director, to the technical director, to the visual arts supervisor. They all say they would much rather make Halo Infinite for Xbox and PlayStation. I have yet to hear anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why is it a problem to substantiate your perspective with facts, right? With corroboration, with industry feedback? Quite frankly, I mean, I appreciate influencers, like journalists, offering their opinion, but really the reason why I listen to them is to provide information that I don't have direct access to. And if I'm going off and doing a bunch of research and presenting a bunch of cases that I feel like, and this is my biggest problem with with mainstream gaming media and journalism, is you guys should all know this. You guys should all have access to this. I shouldn't be the one on a podcast informing people that PlayStation develops their games on top of a different abstraction layer than Xbox. And therefore, there's a delta in the level of effort that would be associated in putting those games on different platforms. Right? I shouldn't have to explain that. The journalists should have technical experts that can explain that.
Yeah. Or they should, or because of the access they have, they should be able to get that information and share that.
Right.
And drive that conversation. Hey guys, look, I talked to a couple developers. Let's talk about why it may or may not be difficult for PlayStation to go day and date on PC based on the feedback that I've gotten from people that actually work in the industry. That's the kind of conversation they should be having. As opposed to, I'll leave the console war stuff for others to debate. What? Like, my God, you have access to the industry. You should be able to put together again, I'll quote what Nibs, his reply. You don't have to agree, but it'd be nice to get a contextual rebuttal. Yeah, you don't have to agree. But your response is console war? Like, Nib's not console warring here. I know I said that before, but he's just not. This to me was kind of it's just very disappointing, because there's a lot of influence that this individual has, and I feel like with that level of influence, I feel like you have a responsibility to your viewers, to your listeners, to be genuine, to be consistent. And I understand opinions can change. But what I do have an issue with is when your voice track changes, or when you pivot, when a certain corporation pivots in their voice track. And that's a problem.
And I would find it totally acceptable to do what Herman Holst himself just did the other day.
Mm-hmm.
I would be totally fine with an influencer or a YouTuber or anyone, as we've talked about, right? Simply saying the conditions and the dynamics of the market have changed. We are aligned right now in terms of our staffing, in terms of our skill set, in terms of the size of our teams, in terms of the way the things that I've mentioned, right, the last couple of podcasts. When I've said for years for Xbox, because I think their organizational structure makes it make less sense for the fact that this isn't how they're currently aligned and attuned. But we're now at the point where like the same argument can be said for Sony. I do not understand why every studio has its own IT department, IT resources, test organization, right? These redundancies that could be operated out of a shared services center, and shared services centers have their organizational problems. I totally get that.
Mm-hmm.
But I will also say one of the things I pointed out, right, was a problem with the Frostbite engine. Is I said the developers that you have that are supposed to be providing support to your other studios who you're telling to onboard the Frostbite engine cannot be run as an endemic part of the studio. They need to be run as a shared service because they're getting tickets. They should be getting stuff through ServiceNow. They should be getting things that say, hey, I've got a problem, right, with your implementation of this particular framework, right? There's a bug. This doesn't work for me, right? And they cannot be under the regime where they're an arm's distance from, right, the creative director who's going to say, hey, put that phone down, right? Like, I don't give a shit what Tiburon is asking for, right? I need you to go work on this Jeep model for Battlefield, right? Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm saying is like these are the type of topics that should be brought up and the types of things that should be entertained. But like we don't get down to that level of detail. We crop dust. We cover things at a surface level, and I don't get it. Like, how is that providing value? It's not providing value. It's just creating a cult of personality, right? That's what 90% of the conversations in the gaming community rally around, and that's unfortunate. People are becoming People are literally becoming less educated about gaming technology, the gaming business, and about the gaming creative process today than they were 20 years ago.
Yeah. Let me get the super chat real quick. Logic. Gaming Forte with the $5 super chat. Thank you, Forte. Says, I can't trust opinions of a man that defends anything Slow-Mo says.
Look,
heard from a topic on DPS Podcast 169. If you know, you know.
And I told Forte, you can't be mad at me and come here hating because I chose a side.
Oh my goodness, that's too funny. That is too funny. But yeah, it just I just keep going back with all the access that that journalists have. And by the way, it's not all journalists. Like there are certain journalist content creators that I listen to. I do read. I do listen to Jeff Grubb. We've had him on the show. I'll read Jason Schreier's articles. I don't agree with how Jason handles conversations on Twitter at times, where he just instant blocks people who are asking him questions or questioning, some of his perspective on some things. But they are content creators that I listen to that are having more nuanced conversations around gaming. I would say Last Stand Media would be one of them. And the the Punching Up podcast, the Defining Duke podcast, and Sacred Symbols podcast. I mean, I listen to those quite regularly because I feel like I get a conversation from there that I don't get on many other podcasts platforms. So or channels. But yeah, it's just, I'll go back to this final thought here. I think we should start as consumers just deserving better from the media and gaming influencers, because I think you said this earlier. And actually I will say this idea of console warring, like, that dismissive comment, I'll leave the console war stuff to others, console war stuff for others debate. That's a very dismissive, almost like I'm not going to have a conversation with you because I'm going to try to silence you or shut you up. I'm going to try to disparage the thing that you put together, that you took time to write, the context, the research, and attribute that to console warring. And that's to me, that's a big problem. And I think it's I think part of it is and the one thing that I've seen too from him and from other people is, you're just jealous. It's like, what?
Yeah, that's what that's what he and his partner tout, right? Danny Pena, Gamertag Media. Right?
Yeah, it's not.
I'm not going to answer your question. When you're bringing up technical facts based on your experience working in the software development, right, technical domain, you're just jealous of my success.
Yeah. But that is a way to try to silence people. Like you said, it's shitification. I think you called it choke point journalism.
Yeah.
Choke point content creators. Like that is content creation. That's exactly what that is.
Yeah. Shout out to Cory Doctorow. That is his actual term. He and his partner, I constantly forget her name. who have come up with the theory of enshittification and choke point capitalism. And yes, I definitely absconded with that term and labeled it to, because I feel like from an economic perspective, that is actually exactly what's happening in the media space. But then I wanted to extrapolate it further to it's extending beyond just what they do on their own platforms, right, and out into social media and in their interaction with their audience.
Yeah, it's a consolidation of media, gaming journalism, and presumably voices too. I mean, the people that have access to the industry. And that's the part that, again, that part really kind of rubs me the wrong way. Like you have all this access, like you should be able to have good dialogue, good conversations with someone like Nib in this instance, look, and if you have that utopian perspective of third-party games, exclusivity shouldn't be a thing. That's fair, but they just kind of brush them off and be like, oh, that's console warring. That's not cool. Or to say that people are jealous. That's not cool. That just leads me to believe that you just can't, you can't have that conversation at that level. I know you've asked him specifics. I think you presented, or have asked him to articulate the business case or the math for, was it day and date? I forget what it was.
Yeah. I just asked him just like low level question. Like, look, Totoki said that he wants people to tighten up their belts. In fact, now I'm looking at a GameIndustry.biz article that just popped, which is Sony's president complained about unaccountable developers missing budgets and schedules, but there are other culprits behind the game division's thin profit margin. Right, and we talked about that on this show, and you and Brap and I behind. Like, this is
logic. Hey, fire up the Batista intro, because you said, what did you said it? You said that the creators were just they were going gangbusters.
Right, and management was fostering it.
Yeah.
Like this goes to rampant overhead costs as well. Right, this goes to, hey, if you're catering lunch for the development staff every day, that has a cost. If your developers are crunching and they're staying in the building till 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, guess what? If that's happening over the summer and you're allowing HVAC to run, that has a cost. It hits your real estate. I talked about companies that I've worked at that literally a cost saving regime was I would be in the building working late each night and I would literally consciously hear the HVAC shutting down.
Hamp, that's when you know it's time to go home, by the way.
I was like, oh man, these
I would hear that. I would
hear
that in my
building. Keep us cool.
Yeah, I would hear that in my building when I worked in DC. I'm like, all right, it's time for me to go home.
Right.
They took away our Keurig cups at one point.
Yeah, exactly. No, I literally worked at a company that I was angry.
And cater lunches.
Yeah. I mean, they literally came through and said, hey, we're taking all the coffee machines away. I'm like, and I was like, and I was just getting into management at the time. I was like, time out. Did you guys take the coffee machines away at corporate HQ?
Oh no.
And I'll be goram if I didn't have meetings up at corporate HQ and I went in there. I was like, these mofos still have their coffee machines. They're
they're not. Yeah, they're not. They're going to make everyone else suffer. But that's a great point. Like when people are talking about some of the budgetary cuts and they're so focused on AAA gaming, that's part of the problem. But there's other dynamics here that we've talked about that are impacting Sony's profit margins. But I think what people probably have had exposure to what you describe, but aren't for whatever reason connecting the dots. Like the bean counters are literally going to like look at every expense and where they can squeeze pennies, like literally. And it will be as something as simple as, like you said, shutting down the HVAC unit early in the day or at night.
Like you not getting that grocery store gift card at the end of the year.
Yeah.
In the Christmas card, right? For your
bonuses. Year-end bonus. Yeah, you're not getting that.
Taking away the voluntary bonuses, right? Like one thing that happens out in corporate America is as a different levels of management, you typically get given a bucket and said, hey, you can reward your staff, right, with some type of quarterly reward, right? And then when you burn through it, it's up, right? Those buckets get taken away, right? So those expenditures can't be made. So it's not just this whole, by going day and date and putting your games on more platforms, you're going to earn more revenue. But again, yes, verily, you may earn more revenue, but the question is, as Totoki said, it's about profitability. And so what I asked Paris was, okay, walk the dog and explain to me, right? This is my Walter White, right? Like when he would always go to, I forget what the character's name was, but he would always go to the guy and like, you want to do this? Okay, talk me through it. Right? What does that look like? How does that wind up in us not both getting shot? Right? And so I said, so explain to me how the man is saying he wants to tighten up his belt and improve operating margins, and you're going to embark now on an endeavor that requires you to bring on more engineering staff, exert higher engineering level of effort, burn more engineering labor hours, which have a cost, right? Lengthen your development pipeline and timeline, increase the number of defects that you have to contend with, extend your O&M tail because now you've got multiple versions to maintain under configuration management, multiple versions that you have to cut separate feature branches on, separate trunks to merge that code back to. When you implement a new feature, now you've got to extrapolate that feature over the multiple versions and repos, right? And maintain parity. So explain to me how all of that is a cost driver, and then show me the math, or at least give me the justification that says you're going to sell enough to overcome that cost to drive enough revenue to be profitable.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And again, I mean, that's just the type of question that I asked that, none of these guys will ever respond to.
Yeah. And again, they, given the access that they have, should be able to go to someone and say, hey, here's a question. Can you run me through this? I'm curious,
They could go to Falke and ask him.
Yeah, they could go to Falke. Yeah, exactly. But I know he didn't respond to you. And it's not just him, by the way. It's other content creators. Like, given the access, they should be presenting not the same arguments that I see from people who run, Xbox, not Xbox, but, console-centric podcast, who have who are part of the community, or they shouldn't be having the same talking points as everyone else in the community, as the mob, as you refer to them as. They should be coming from a in my opinion, an informed perspective. Providing a little more nuance instead of saying, God, what's the Xbox saying? When we all game, we all win. I always forget, but
when everybody plays, we all win.
When everyone plays, we all win. Yeah, I mean, like they're just like that's the basis of their talking points. Like, guys, you have all this access. You guys talk about how you are at DICE. You guys should be having different conversations. You guys should be championing those conversations that are a bit more nuanced. That's the frustrating thing about this to me. You have all that power.
Yeah, it's literally like after multiple decades playing games, 2 decades working in the content creation space, the level of conversation I'm exposed to is no greater than the level of conversation I had in my junior high school lunchroom talking about Sega versus Nintendo, and I don't get it.
I don't get it either. Actually, I think the lunchroom conversation was better, actually.
And people are paying for it.
I know, it's crazy. People are paying. That's why I say, like, if you want a different conversation, come to BRAP. Check out Game Logic's channel, the E2KG network. And then I always forget your Tuesday podcast. It's Talking Games? I always forget.
Talking about games.
Talking about games. Thank you.
It is a working title that will probably be the working title for a very long time.
I like it.
Yeah, I went with that just because I've hung myself up in the past trying to come up with some like witty, title that I felt like was, and I was like, finally, I was just like, no, let me just do the thing and not worry about the marketing and the PR.
Yeah, read GameIndustry.biz. I mean, they just tweeted out that article that you just referenced. Great article.
Yeah,
So
travel budgets get tightened up. People aren't allowed to stay in hotels. You're told to stick to per diem.
Hey,
if you go over per diem, you're going to pay it out of pocket.
Yeah. Hey, you're not lying. I mean, I remember we used to do this thing. I think I mentioned this to you, that what we called it 105. But we also did something called President's Club, and President's Club used to be like in Jamaica, Cancun, Mexico. Hamp, when the Great Recession hit, man, oh my god, you know where President's Club was? It was at Ruby Tuesdays.
Bruh, like
I'm not even. We went from Jamaica to Ruby Tuesdays.
Yeah, offsites get canceled. Hey, this year we're not doing the leadership offsite at freaking at the Waldorf or whatever, or the Holiday Inn. Yeah, the offsite is going to be here. We're gonna cater out the freaking Panera Bread.
Oh man!
How often in cycles like this, again, trying to get down to profitability and better margins, how often do you hear the thing kick in of, hey, all accounts receivable, you guys need to get those in within 30 days. It's 30 days, same as cash. Anything over that, like we're not doing it. You guys need to tighten that up because that impacts our margin.
Yeah.
Right. Invoices need to get out on time. Like look, when you're ready to invoice, I want to invoice that day.
Yeah.
And I want everything collected. Like, there's 99 bajillion ways, right, that things are going to have to be done, right? It's not just, like, day and date is literally one of the more complicated, complex formulas and things to take on and approach of numerous, it kicks off all sorts of numerous, conversations and analyses that have to be done by bean counters in conjunction with technical experts. Right, I constantly go back to Microsoft making this comment. Oh, we're gonna put Call of Duty on Switch. We're gonna put Call of Duty everywhere. And at that point in the conversation, because they couldn't talk to the Activision engineers, right, while the acquisition was in pipeline, they literally hadn't talked to a technical expert who actually writes code on Call of Duty to ask them what the complexity was going to be in taking on that endeavor. They didn't talk to them about, hey, what is the performance profile going to look like if I tell you guys you need to crunch down and put this thing on Nintendo Switch? And that's not saying it's impossible, but my point is that there's nobody who's a technical expert, because there are several different ways to go about doing estimates, and one of the methodologies that we have is this thing called expert opinion, right? They hadn't talked to anybody who could have rendered them an expert opinion on what the cost and the lift of that was going to be, the type of staff they were going to have, figure out how expensive those people are. They had done nothing to actually make, in my opinion, an educated assessment, right? Now, of course, maybe you have a prior, right, Activision employee, right, who could participate in that conversation. I just don't, So my point is that you can't get to these things by using presumptive math when you haven't been involved in the domain and you haven't actually made any effort to even run the numbers. Let's even not even talk about domain expertise. But again, you have lots of people, no offense, you have lots of people who have never put their hands on a keyboard beyond Mr. Schwartz's 10th grade high school computer programming class, right? Asserting that porting to other platforms is easy and low cost. It can be done by teams that are currently already in place. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, it's more nuanced than that.
No, it absolutely is. Yeah, and this is where I think content creators who have access to developers, to corporations, could be driving the conversation in a very different way that could be beneficial to consumers, to gamers, by giving them a little bit of that inside baseball. And that's just not happening.
Yep.
Anyhow. All right. That's all I got, Logic, for today's rant. Is there anything else you want to discuss before we wrap up?
No, man. Nope.
All right. Well, I'm going to get back to playing some Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Logic, democracy's calling. Democracy needs you.
And the war is on against the Covenant. And I'm going to need you to squat up and get your Mjolnir armor back on. Right, and get ready to go. Get ready to drop.
I might need to do that too. But actually, I actually need to watch. I didn't get a chance to watch Halo Season 2 last night. I need to watch that episode because it's good. Season 2 is actually good. I'm enjoying it a lot. There's some. I hope. I don't think they will. I want to see like a darker take on Halo. I feel like that this show has that kind of undertone to it. I like it. But we'll see. They probably won't do it.
I really wish, and this isn't to throw shade. Like I really wish they would get someone in who, I don't know. I'm trying to think of the right way to say it without like shaming. I just was like a really great, and I mean when I say great, I mean like J.R.R. Tolkien level, right? Like I'm talking about. I really wish they would be able to tap one of the great story writers of our time, right, to pull that thing together, lay out the roadmap, right, of the story for several seasons, right, and then go do that.
Yeah,
I feel like that's what that lore and that IP deserve.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. Yeah, that's a great point.
And I'm not talking about James Gunn.
No James Gunn. No, I hear you. I hear you.
I would be fine. I would actually be fine with Favreau doing it. I know a lot of people don't like him and what he's doing with Star Wars, but
I actually like what Favreau's doing with Star Wars.
no, I love Favreau.
Yeah, I don't think I think he's done a great job with Star Wars.
Yep.
But anyhow, all right. Please, everyone, hit that like button if you haven't done so already. And if you're new, consider subscribing, hitting the bell notification so you're alerted when we go live. I appreciate everyone hanging out for this impromptu BRAP rant. And I want to thank my co-host here, Game Logic, for joining. Logic, always appreciate your time. Thank you so much. You're always providing a very insightful perspective. So something I've said it to you. I've said this to you before. We need more of that in the conversation. It's grossly lacking. And one of the things that's always a head scratcher for me, for people who love the industry, I'm just surprised that people just don't do more homework and really become students in the industry, because it's fascinating how the games are made, how these businesses operate, how these decisions are made to release certain games, and how the decisions are made to cut budgets or to rein in costs. All that stuff's fascinating to me in terms of how games are made. So, but anyhow, have a great weekend, everyone. Probably won't just, unless something else drops news related, I may not do it a BRAP rant this weekend, but you never know. You never know. But what you should do is follow me on Twitter at BRAP_podcast. So that way you can be alerted or know when we go live. Can always count on YouTube to give you that alert notification, because YouTube isn't reliable. So you definitely give me a follow on Twitter, BRAP_podcast. And Gaming Logic, I don't know if you want to be found, but if you do, let everyone know they can find you.
Yeah, Sunday nights, 8:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Enough to Keep Going Weekly Games podcast over on E2KG. And then my own solo cast over on the Rounding Off Infinity Gaming channel on YouTube, talking about games. I don't have a time for that, but you can keep an eye out on social media and on the YouTube channel. At worst case, you can catch the VOD after the fact. And as Brett mentioned, right, it's a show where I go into the historical, financial, and technical underpinnings below and behind some of the news stories going on around in the news cycle and the zeitgeist. So, the comment that I made earlier about, so much of it is kind of crop dusting and picking at things at the surface level. I spend, 3 days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I do research. I go back and hit my own textbooks. I try and bring a lot of that into the script for the show and really dig at a lot of the details. Again, my point is not so that you take my word as gospel and say that, he's got it right and that's what we believe. My point is to kind of arm you with information to equip you to go off and do additional research and then arrive at your own conclusions.
Knowledge is power, as they say, Logic.
And now
also want to say thank you to everyone in the live chat. The chat was actually really, really, really great this afternoon. So thank you, chat. Appreciate it. All right, everyone. Have a great weekend. Enjoy time playing video games, and we will catch you next time. Thank you again.